There's something to be said about the ability to come into a warm space, especially if you've been out playing in the snow. And this last week I did a video about winterizing the camper, and I realized that there was a lot of things that I left out, some of the things that I just take for granted. And so I started writing down a list of those items and realized the list kept getting longer and longer. So I'd like to just touch base on some of those things here in this video today. Hopefully this will be helpful, especially when you think about the big picture of how you want to create your camper van. So I've been building vans for about the last 6 years. And so one of the primary goals is these vans would be agile and able to go off-grid in the summertime, but also to enjoy winter sports, winter activities in the winter season, so that other 6 months. And so our family especially enjoys going up to the mountains, and at least in the western states, the snow park permits allow you to stay overnight, and so that gives you easy access to a lot of these winter recreation. But it's important that you build the camper with these bigger principles in mind. One of those is especially the concept of weight, that a lighter camper will keep more of the vehicle's weight on the front wheels. It'll have better traction. Well, that's traction in the summertime if you're on back roads, but also traction in the wintertime in the snow. And so most recreational vehicles are created primarily for summer, that they don't really even think much about how to use those vehicles in the winter, especially obviously if it's a travel trailer, fifth wheel, you're not going to be, that's not your primary vehicle for propulsion. So they're just not made that way. But, and so if the RV that you're using was created in a manufacturing situation that doesn't think about winter use, then you have a lot of issues to overcome to be able to use it for winter use. And so if you start with the conversion, start with the cargo van as the structure and use the exterior framework of that vehicle in a way that is beneficial for winter use, then you're miles ahead compared to a lot of the other recreational vehicle options. And so my goal is to build a vehicle that is good for year-round use, all 12 months. And so I kind of termed it a van for all seasons. You begin with by thinking about weight, and you make choices about weight. And so in round numbers, a vehicle starts with a ProMaster. You have about 4,000 pounds that you can put in the back of the vehicle. And some people can do a conversion with like 1,000 pounds. And that is pretty impressive that you can keep your vehicle that light and be able to do all of that. But with just a little bit of effort, a little bit of decision making, then it's kind of easy to build the entire camper with about 2,000 pounds. And that still leaves you 2,000 pounds under the maximum. But if you don't think about weight, you're not concerned about that, then there's a pretty easy chance that you can get to that 3,000 or 4,000 pound total gross vehicle cargo. And so then it's a lot harder for traction, it's a lot harder on the engine, it's a lot harder for brakes, it's transmissions, gas mileage, you name it. All of those things are benefited by building a slightly lighter camper. And so one of those benefits then is winter traction. And so that comes along with one of your first decisions that you have to make is, are you going to mount anything underneath the vehicle? And my recommendation is to not mount anything under the vehicle. That keeps that area free and clear. It allows you to be more agile, off-road. But it also, when the winter time comes, you don't have to worry about keeping all those things that are hanging down there warm and dry. And so just to no gray water tanks, black water tanks, extra pipes. Some people hang batteries down there. I also use so some people have a mounted step that pulls out. Sometimes it's motorized and all that, but that does hang down some. Instead, I use just a simple step stool that on the top of it has a really good exterior mat that you can wipe your feet on. So as you're getting into the vehicle, especially if you're using it either off season or in the wintertime, you can step up on that step stool, wipe your feet off, and all the splatter goes back down to the ground. And so then when you step into the vehicle, you have significantly benefited keeping the inside clean. So then if you don't put things underneath the van, then you should keep everything inside the van. And so what I've done is I've got a 20-gallon freshwater tank that's back here, and I have gray water tanks that are underneath the kitchen galley area. I have the toilet. For instance, here it's a dry toilet. I recommend urine separating dry toilets for lots of different reasons, but one of those is the winter use, where basically you just have to dump the toilet tank, the urine tank, periodically, but none of it is being suspended underneath the vehicle. And then the batteries, for instance. So now in the past, when people had flooded lead acid or AGM batteries, then cold weather camping really wasn't much of an issue with those. They dealt pretty well with cold weather, but most everybody is using lithium now, and so then you have to take it to the next step. So some of the time you can get lithium batteries that have internal heaters, and I recommend that. I have a single 280 amp hour battery right back here underneath the bed. So a single battery is helpful because then you don't have to worry about multiple batteries as far as the BMS and some of those things, cabling, but also the winter season, if you have solar, for instance, on the top of your van, then it's helpful to have more solar for the winter season because you don't generate as much. So on this van, I have 500 watts of solar on the top. So even a slightly cloudy day or a slight sunny day, they can still generate some good energy. And then the other thing is that when you're driving down the road, it's especially in the winter time, it's helpful to have DC to DC charging. So I have a 50 amp charger for this vehicle, and that really helps charge up those batteries, especially in the wintertime. Insulation is obviously a big deal. There are lots of options about insulation. This vehicle is not finished. I'm still doing a lot of the internal stuff, but you can see, I don't know if you can see this, but the insulation up here, I use 1-inch polyiso foam sheets. And then, so any of the areas in the van that are smooth and flat can really take advantage of that 1-inch or 1.5 inch or 2-inch, depending on where it is. But basically, to glue the polyiso foam to the surface using gaps and cracks spray foam, then it essentially seals that surface from any moisture that will get into it. And then around the edges, you put foam also to seal the edge, and then cover that with the paneling that I use. And so corners that are awkward, tight, doors, any areas that are just difficult to put the flat foam sheets in, I use Thinsulite. And that's a great way to deal with the uneven surfaces. But the combination of those two things gives me, oftentimes, like this wall right here has R14 because I can get a full 2 inches of insulation. A lot of my lower walls can get that much higher. The floor I do with XPS, the pink foam usually is what it comes in. And so but that's completely waterproof, and I don't glue it down at all. And then the vinyl I put down a full sheet of vinyl, but I don't glue it because of the issues of contraction and expansion with temperatures. So the fact that it isn't glued allows it to adjust to those temperatures better and not cause any problems in the future. These main pillars are kind of awkward to cover, and yet I use 3/4 inch neoprene foam that has a peel and stick on the back, so I can have a nice soft pillar that then is covered with this 4-way stretch fabric. And that deals with one of the main areas that especially are difficult to work around but also insulate for the winter season. Windows. So there's lots of different window options out there. I've chosen to go with the slider windows. I like these The slider windows are long-term, effective, they're readily available, most common used in just standard RVs. But what's nice about the ProMaster, the walls are flatter, and so you can use these kind of windows. But these come with an 1.5 inch thick trim ring, and so I create a frame that goes around the trim ring compresses against, and then I add this box. And as you can see back here, here's an example of a sheet foam insulation. I use 1/2 inch polyiso foam. I cover both sides with silver. I trim the edges with black duct tape, and make it so that the fact that I can insert this polyiso foam into this area makes this a perfect cover for insulation. It solves one of the biggest problems for cold weather in vans is what do you do about the windows and how to keep warm. It's important to have your wall covering to also be effective in the winter. So I use 1/4 inch paneling with 1/8 inch foam, and then it's covered by fabric. And my panelings isn't installed yet. I'm not at that point, but that way it'll give me access to that paneling later if I need to open it up and check anything in those walls. But also there's an added insulation to that type of paneling. Heaters. Heaters are a big deal, and it's a pretty awesome advantage in vans to have good heat. A lot of people try different kinds of heaters. I've used a couple different types of propane heaters, and I'm probably going to switch to the Velvet gasoline heater as the next project. It is nice to have the same fuel source for the vehicle as what you use for heaters, so there's some advantages there. But you want a heater that is externally vented to the outside and has an ability to set a temperature. And so then you can set it at 58 degrees or whatever it is that you need at the time, and it'll adjust to that. And so then it's taking the outside air, it's burning it, it's exhausting the air outside, but at the same time it's heating the air that's inside. So it's two separate closed cell loops. And then within the vehicle itself, it's super important to think about air circulation in the vehicle. There's a lot of times when people have regions of their van that isn't warmed or cold, depending on the season, because of airflow. So in this case, like I have a propane heater that vents out right down here at the base, and it kicks air this way. Well, then the cold air return is on the back side of this same bed bench area. So then it circulates the air in a big circle and hopefully gets to all the different areas, especially since the water tank is inside that one back there. One trick to help with cold weather camping is to hang up insulated blankets or something like that to isolate off, especially the cab area or across the back. Those are kind of the two key spots that it's pretty impressive the difference you can make when you hang up. Sometimes even a sheet can make a difference, but something that helps to isolate the cold that's right there and then warm up the interior area. So obviously to get to these winter camping sites, you need to have good traction. So kind of like I mentioned earlier in the video, you want to make sure that you have over 50% of your weight on the front wheels, and that can pretty easily be done. Like I said, if I have about a 7,000 pound camper, I'm 2,000 pounds under the max, and when I do that, I have about 54% of the weight still on the front wheels. But if you build a camper that has, maybe a shower and undermount tanks and lots of other things, and it's much more full of stuff in the back, then the chance when you're at like 8,000 or 9,000 pounds, then you've got more weight over the back wheels than you actually have on the front. And then your traction isn't good in the wintertime. It's also super important to think about the kind of tires you use. A lot of times we will be driving quite a ways on a highway, and then we get to our destination where we do need more like off-road tires. And so we found the Falcon Wild Peak to be a good balance of those two things. If you really are in snow for a number of months during the wintertime, then to change to just true winter tires and have a completely separate set mounted on rims is a great way to go. It's also important to think about chains or in some cases snow socks are an option that are similar to chains and are easier to install. But a ProMaster with good chains is amazing where it can go in the snow, unlike some other vehicles even. During the winter time, some people buy a camper van and treat it like a normal RV, and so then they park it in the winter and they don't use it at all. And it's too bad because you're investing a significant amount of money in this resource, and yet to use it year-round is really helpful. One is just by driving it periodically, keeps the engine and everything in good shape. Any vehicle that's just parked does tend to deteriorate. And so by using it part of the time as a second vehicle, maybe to do errands and so on, is really helpful rather than just parking it for 6 months. And then depending on the temperatures and what you're doing, then there'd be times when you would need to winterize by draining the system and so on. Sometimes it's really cold, and so like down to like 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So sometimes you need to bring the battery inside if it's in a really cold situation like that. Sometimes you have to scrape off the snow off your solar panels to keep things charged up. And I think one other thing I wanted to mention is I've purposely built a simple plumbing system in this vehicle where the 20-gallon tank is in the back. There's a submersible pump that pumps the water up to the faucet when you turn on the faucet. And by going with that route with plumbing, then the winterizing that is actually quite easy because it doesn't have a lot of connections, it doesn't have a hot water system, and it makes that step of either using it in the wintertime or even draining it in the wintertime is very simple. So thank you for letting me share a little bit about these other ideas on winterizing and the use of your camper in the winter season. Enjoy. Thank you.